Well, when I was growing up, that seems like so long ago, doesn't it? I would love to spend time out in my grandparents' garages. Both sets of grandparents, one on the farm and one in town. And each garage was organized in its own unique way. The town garage was definitely the cleaner of the two. You'd go poking around and you'd have to navigate the dust and the occasional dead cricket. Ugh. And there were lots of things to go poke around in. And I was amazed at this tool or that, and I would dig through the toolboxes and the tool chest, and I was fascinated with all the saws and hammers. I mean, how many hammers does one person need? A lot, apparently. And for the tools that I was unfamiliar with, I would try to puzzle out what it was used for and how it worked. Trying to figure out what an oil filter wrench does without seeing it being used first is a puzzling experience. And I imagine I look like Ariel from The Little Mermaid when she would use a fork as a comb in a thing called a dingle hopper. I mean, both my grandparents knew exactly where everything was, too. And I'm not sure anyone else knew, though, but they certainly did. It's in the top drawer, right side, in the back, next to the dingle hopper, and it's got a chip in the wood handle. They also had these fascinating buckets of little things, all those trinkets that defied categorization with maybe the exception of their size. Maybe you know what I'm talking about. Usually the small things were in the little jars that were salvaged from the kitchen, baby food jars filled with small screws, pickle jars with nails, plastic buckets in the corner with the larger things, the occasional loose bolt or nut in the bottom of the toolbox, that random Allen wrench from that piece of furniture that you put together, that wrench that was provided. Those things never get tossed. I noticed when I was a teenager, my dad's collection of those miscellaneous things would keep growing and growing. And I'm confident the older that you get, the more and more you collect those type of things. Because those little things might be useful sometime, but more times than not, they just sit there, taking up space and can seem useless. The extra washer that you never know, you might need that. The extra screw or those bolts from the back of that fits your TV mount. You know, those extra screws that, by golly, maybe if I take down and move that TV to another spot, I'll need those screws, even though you won't. You put it in a Ziploc baggie and you put it there on the workbench. Those leftovers never seem to ever get tossed out, and they also never seem to get used. Now, today's gospel lesson is the start of what theologians call the bread of life discourse in John. So we're taking a break from the Gospel of Mark for the next 5 weeks to take a detour into John's gospel. In all the Gospels, Jesus is always on the move. And today, Jesus has left Jerusalem and the confrontations that he had in that city. The authorities there were on a mission to discredit Jesus and confront him after he had healed on the Sabbath. Now, Jesus has left Jerusalem and has come to the far side of the Sea of Galilee. When he lands on the other side, there is a large crowd of people that have been following him. And it seems that wherever Jesus is, the crowd follows. And they follow him because he just keeps healing the sick. And those in the crowd are amazed at what St. John calls signs. Signs because they point to who Jesus is. Signs that remind the people of the prophet Elisha. Signs that remind the people of the prophets of old and what they say about the one who will come after them. And Jesus goes up on the mountain to get a better look at the crowd, I suppose. And it seems that the crowd that day is larger than usual. And Jesus looks out and sees the multitude. And as he surveys this crowd, this multitude, he then turns to Philip. Philip, where are we to buy bread for all these people to eat? John tells us that Jesus asked this question to test Philip. And Philip jumps ahead of Jesus and starts talking about how much it would cost. Jesus just asked Philip where they could buy bread for the crowd. Jesus doesn't ask if the people should be fed, but rather how they can be fed. I get a little antsy anytime our English translations of the Bible talk about someone being tested. One could think that Jesus was trying to tempt Philip into doing something or saying something to ensnare him. But that doesn't fit with the Jesus that I have come to know and follow. Jesus asked Philip this question not because Jesus wondered what he was going to do. John tells us that Jesus already knew. He asked Philip this question to get a sense of the state of Philip's imagination about Jesus, to get a sense of Philip's imagination in him. While Philip's imagination is limited to mathematical calculations on how much one person would eat, then multiplied by all the people there, while Philip was limited to thinking that he would need X amount of loaves multiplied by how much each loaf costs and then divided by daily wages. While Philip was calculated to thinking, according to my calculations, that means more than 6 months' worth of wages. In the meantime, a boy walks up to Andrew and says, well, I don't have much. All I have is 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. My mom told me to pack a lunch, so I brought more than enough for the trip. While Philip is off doing bread calculus, Andrew offers up this small token. Andrew's imagination is akin to the prophet Ezekiel's. Ezekiel is asked by the Lord if the valley of dry bones that is before him can live. And just like Ezekiel's answer, Andrew's imagination is simply, only you know, Lord. Only you know, Lord, what can be done with 5 loaves and 2 fish. Only you know, Lord, what can be done with a meal that would not even satisfy the hunger of the apostles, let alone the crowd. Only you know, Lord. And then Jesus has the disciples sit the crowd down. And then takes this small offering, takes the bread, gives thanks, breaks it. And Jesus distributes the meal. Jesus himself is the host of the meal. And Jesus walks through the crowd of people giving bread and fish, enough for all to be satisfied. Does not just feed them a snack, does not just feed them a small meal, but feeds them until all are satisfied. Do not miss that small detail in the Gospel of John. Do not miss that in a world where hunger was real and a present danger, in a world in which food preservation was hard, a world in which this crowd might not know where their next meal comes from, they all ate. And ate until they leaned back, placed their hands on their stomachs, and sighed. Then Jesus has the audacity to tell the disciples to go collect the remnants of the meal, pick up the leftovers. Hey, Philip, go get a basket for each of you, and the rest of you go pick up the leftovers. And Philip continues to be amazed and has his imagination stretched. And he goes through the crowd and he returns with a full basket. Andrew and Peter bring back a full basket as well. So do James and John. So does Judas. So do all the disciples. And they return to find that they have 12 baskets full of barley bread, one for each of them. Jesus provided more than enough to satisfy the crowd, more than enough to satisfy them. And in this moment, what's going through these disciples' minds? Surely it must be, who is this man? The crowd has an answer to that question. Surely this is the prophet that is to come into the world. And Jesus had the disciples collect those remnants, those leftovers. The thing is that Jesus had already collected the leftovers when the crowd of people followed him to the mountain. These people, society had abandoned, were the leftovers. The people that society had labeled as insignificant were the leftovers. These leftovers are the ones who hunger and thirst for righteousness, and instead of being filled, they have been left empty by the society they lived in. These are the ones that society has cast off, the ones who are sick, the ones who are poor, the ones who have been left out and left over. And Jesus would see that no one is forgotten. Jesus always comes back for those who are left behind. Jesus always gathers the leftovers. Jesus' sign of the feeding of the multitude revealed the nature of the kingdom of God, where leftovers, both food and people, are neither insignificant nor abandoned. How often have we been the ones in the crowd? How often have we been the ones left on the outside looking in? How often have we been the ones that the world doesn't want? It might be the time when the kids have all grown up and left the house, and now you're empty nesting. And you wonder if the kids will come back. What happens now that they're all gone? Do they even need me? Feeling on the outside. Feeling unwanted like last week's leftovers because you didn't get the promotion. You didn't get the job you really wanted, the job that you were more than qualified for, the job that if given the chance, you would succeed. Feeling on the outside because there is more month than paycheck. Feeling on the outside, feeling left out and left over. Jesus sees the crowd and gathers them in because not one will be lost to him. Not one will be lost in the kingdom of God. And the thing is that Jesus still sends the disciples out into this world to collect the leftovers. They go here and they go there, even today. They go to the ends of the earth, collecting the left out and the leftovers of society. Jesus sees the crowd and gathers us in, because not one will be lost to him. Not one will be lost in the kingdom of God. Hear the gospel.